Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Need Some Introduction. I'm your host, Victor, and on this podcast, we're normally going week to week, discussing some recent TV offerings, providing some insight and context along the way, along with some recommendations, some pairings thematically linked to whatever we might be watching at the time. We just recently wrapped up The Night Manager, the Amazon Prime sequel series of the John le Carré adaptation, a 10-year gap in those seasons. A very entertaining spy thriller. We continue to cover The Pit and do expect a recap of the current episode of the season over the weekend. And Darren and I continue to discuss industry here as well. Just a reminder to anybody out there who is watching industry and or A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, HBO is releasing those episodes earlier on Friday due to the distractions of the Super Bowl this weekend. But in today's episode, actually something new we're going to try here. A new contributor, Alan, who I've been emailing for quite some time. I've actually recommended his podcast, Songs of the Years, here on the podcast. Do track it down. I think it's only available on Spotify. A very interesting format where Alan basically goes through his own personal biography, year over year, his favorite songs of the particular year, along with some biographical and historical context to each one of those songs. Alan and I actually recorded a conversation about Pluribus, which never got published. But indeed, we will be publishing this episode. And I hope to continue this format in general of walking through a particular filmmaker's career when something new is coming out. This could be maybe rewatching some classic TV as well. I know that most of you out there prefer the TV content to the movie content. So perhaps we will be rewatching some of those classic series in the future as well. But for now, we're kicking off a rewatch of Christopher Nolan's entire filmography, starting with his very first, very inexpensively produced $7,000 budgeted black and white film noir called Following. And Following is available to watch on AMC Plus, on Canopy, Knopy, if your library participates in that network of streaming services, the Criterion Channel, and on Tubi, which is where Alan actually tracked it down, and available to rent on Amazon Prime or Apple TV. If you've never seen this, a very impressive, barely over an hour production, basically an extended graduate thesis, which got Nolan on the map, got wide distribution, or at least art house distribution around the world, did very solid business, became a huge streaming hit when it eventually hit Netflix, in no small part because it premiered there shortly after the massive success of Memento. And of course, this film got him Memento. We will dig into Nolan's biography in more detail as we walk through his films and how that might intersect with some of his personal issues, some of his history, the relationship with his brothers. One of them also a very successful writer and producer. And we will be doling out a lot of that information over the course of this entire series. But for now, Al and I will be breaking down this first film, Following. So if you've happened to seen this film before, or of course track it down on any of those free services or paid services, it is a very brisk watch. It is primarily intriguing as a template for so many other films that will come later in Nolan's career. And stay tuned, we will be covering Memento, a film that both Alan and I absolutely love, one of my favorite films of all times, and that will be coming up in our next conversation. But to kick things off, let's start off with the relatively low stakes, but very impressive Following. All right, Alan. So this will be the first, we've spoken a couple times now, but we haven't published any of our previous conversations. This was, of course, supposed to be for the Patreon, which still has never materialized, despite all my saying it would. And trying to force
Who knows
myself
if any of it will ever see the light of day, but that's
exactly. Well, this one will, because it will publish this week, because
Okay.
it just happens to be a perfect moment for us to begin this project that I had
Nice.
suggested to rewatch all of Christopher Nolan's films. Why is that? Because the Super Bowl is coming this weekend. Probably the most high profile preview we're going to see is for the new Nolan film, The Odyssey.
Oh, right. Okay.
And of course, he has 12, 13 movies he's made up until this point. And we have just about enough time, if we do this like every couple of weeks,
Yeah.
to hit that target when it comes out in his preferred date of mid-June, which is usually when his films come out.
Yeah. I'm excited for it. I'm not like a complete Nolan fanboy. Some of his movies I love, others not as much, but still, it just seems like a real fun project.
Yeah, I'm very excited for it. It's just such a massive project, and you wonder how many more of these we will actually see, other than the Christopher
Right.
Nolan. Who else could get something like this made when you think
Right.
about how films that are geared for adults are less and less
Well, and on
successful
film, I'm sure never going to happen again on film.
and
So,
shot on film, shot on IMAX, right? Entirely on IMAX.
right. Oh, just when you mentioned that we're not recording for the first time, but this is the first one that the audiences will actually, I thought, I'm sure that you're well aware of this. In TV production, that kind of thing happens all the time where an actor has to come in and do the final scene of the season or something like the very first take, and it's all mixed up like that. So we're just acting like people in the biz.
We have the unaired pilots that will never see the light of day, like the Buffy
Right.
pilot or the Game of Thrones pilot that will never be seen.
Oh, does Buffy have one like that? I didn't know that.
Yeah, Buffy has a full pilot that was shot like a year before, and it's very
Oh,
similar to what happened with Game of Thrones, where they saw the pilot and they're like, "We're on board for this show, but not for this pilot. You have to start from scratch again." So,
so are you talking about the original Mothership show? I know there was another show that they did a pilot for.
yeah, the original Game of Thrones show, you can actually see it if you go to IMDb. Not you can see clips
Oh,
from it. Like they have an episode 0, which was the unaired pilot. But apparently,
okay. It is.
the cast is the same, by the way, and they did
Oh,
reuse some of the scenes. But there's a production error because some of the scenes they forgot that the cast had beards, but they were clean shaven in the new
oh,
footage. So they literally
right.
have thrown in a scene where they're pretending they have just shaved before coming into the next stuff. So very low tech.
I guess CGI wasn't up to that kind of thing at that time. I think now they could just fix it in post.
Yeah, I mean, but it's a lot cheaper to pretend you shaved your face right before the scene anyway. So,
I suppose, yeah. That's funny.
but speaking of low tech, I mean, this is somebody, Nolan, speaking of all these things, is someone who does not want to rely on CGI, does not want to rely on digital photography, and is a little obstinate about
Right.
that, but has had an incredible career in that. I think at one point I had done the research and it still holds up. This was before Tenet had come out, but he had hit, I think when Dunkirk came out, it was his 10th film. Even when you look at Spielberg, even when you look at anybody out there, that no one had ever had 10 films in a row that were both certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes and had
Hmm.
been financially successful as well. And he
Oh,
was
wow.
10 for 10. He has now, since then, since Dunkirk, had Tenet, which we can talk about that when we get around to it, whether how big of a hit that was. You have to put an asterisk next to that, that it made a substantial amount of money.
I think you have to triple your budget in today's movie economy to be considered break even, right?
Right. And that film barely gets there, which could put a
Okay.
little bit of an asterisk on that record. Of course, that came out the year of the pandemic shutdowns. Like theaters literally opened up
All right.
to show that film.
Asterisk to the asterisk.
Exactly. Given that the film made $350 million, which was an astronomical amount of money, given that people were coming out of their homes to risk their lives, in many people's estimations, to see that film.
That's right. I remember that being a controversy.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. I
Yeah,
totally
people
forgot
were
about that. That's
angry
right.
about him for like, why is he still doing this? And maybe he should have held
Right.
it, by the way, when you consider they held the Top Gun film and what a massive success that
Right.
was.
In Dune, didn't they hold Dune or something? Or what am I thinking of with Dune? No, they sent
They
it
put it
home.
on day and date. They put it
Yeah.
on HBO at the same time.
Right. That's what it was. Okay.
Which is what broke his relationship with Warner Brothers. Every film of his had come out through Warner Brothers until Oppenheimer, because with Tenet, and then at the time, HBO was saying, Warner Brothers was saying that we're going date and date now that the pandemic's happened.
Right.
This is going to be our going forward policy. And then he left Warner Brothers in general, that relationship, and did Oppenheimer through Universal, I believe it was. And it went, but like, it was a big bidding war for that film,
Right.
which
Right.
of course was a phenomenal success also. But what's interesting
So,
about all that is that, of course, then Warner Brothers, as soon as the pandemic passed, they're like, "Hey, wait a second, let's have a window between the theatrical release and the home video release, instead of doing
right.
date and date, which they had sworn was going to be their going forward plan of action."
Forever
And
and ever they were saying that after the
forever, that was
pandemic?
going to be their new policy. Yeah,
Oh.
exactly. They
Oh,
thought it
just
was
to
going to be a
just
way to drive subscribers to HBO.
right. Okay.
And
Yeah, that makes sense, I guess.
but the irony, of course, is that what they've discovered over and over again is that films that are released in theaters, when they premiere, on streaming do better because they seem
Yeah.
to be more prestigious, right? So it's not a
Right.
Netflix premiere, it's something that was played in
Right.
theaters. So you basically have that free publicity of seeing something in theaters, people wanting to see it in theaters, and then available to watch at home. And you think about the first Dune movie, which of course was competing with the HBO release, but made like
Right.
a little over $100 million in the US. And the second one made almost 300. It basically doubled worldwide, more than doubled its box
Right.
office. So a big mistake to release these things day and
Yeah.
date. But now the question, of course, is there any chance that he comes back to Warner Brothers? I think he's pretty happy right now with what's happened here with Oppenheimer and with The Odyssey.
And that's with what studio? I guess I didn't pay attention to that.
The Odyssey, that's a good question, actually. I think he's still at Universal. I actually have it in front of it. So
Okay.
I'll pull it up. And it is
Hey, well,
Universal coming.
Universal,
Universal. Yep.
they should just go day and date on Peacock. There you go.
If Odyssey premiered on Peacock, that would definitely drive subscriptions. That's for sure.
Yeah. So we're starting with following. I guess I have to figure from what you said that was financially successful. Is that just because it cost 59 cents to make, so it's easy to get a profit?
Pretty much. Actually, it is a phenomenally successful film because it cost $7,000 to make this film.
Right.
Then it played a bunch of film festivals. When it was released in the US, it only made maybe $100,000 or so, but made his reputation, and pretty successful, by the way. And then it basically, as a Memento was taking off overseas, it was released theatrically overseas and made millions of dollars for a film that cost thousands. It's remarkable.
Yeah.
And
well,
then
I hate to blow my cinephile hipster cred, but I never heard of him until Memento.
Yeah, and that's the other part I was going to say, is that Memento itself had a very limited release in the US. And then after Memento was eventually released on DVD. And I remember I saw it following on Netflix when Netflix first started streaming, because it was so low budget.
Okay.
It was like a freebie pretty much. It didn't cost a lot for the licensing rights at the time anyway.
What
so
year
it was actually,
would this have been?
Well, the film came out in 98, but I probably didn't see it until whatever that was, like probably, it was definitely after Memento, maybe 2002, 2003.
Okay. I know
but I came to Memento was my first. Yeah.
I should probably save it for when we do that podcast, but I know the exact date when I saw Memento. It was the late night of September 10, 2001. You'll probably think I'm a horrible person and not want to have anything to do with me once I tell you this, but I've always remembered the fact that I was so blown away by Memento and just how it pulls you into that kind of just brain space of just pondering or whatever. And I think it does for a lot of people. And so I was so absorbed in it and on my computer reading everything I could about the movie. And then I saw some alerts and saw what happened with the World Trade Center. And I was like, wow, okay, that's crazy. We're under attack. And then I thought about that or focused on that for 2 minutes maybe. And then I went back to reading stuff about Memento.
That is,
I was really just entranced by that movie.
I saw it in theaters, and I had read a review in the New York Times or somewhere that had talked about this film that was so audacious, told in reverse order. And also one of these reviews that was basically saying, don't know anything about it. Exactly the type of thing that is catnip for me. I couldn't wait to see it. I saw it when it was still in very limited release. This film, another point of this is that this film opened very limited release, like a handful of theaters, and you can see it on Box Office Mojo or one of these websites. It was only making a few $1,000s.
Following now?
How's that? No, I'm talking Memento at this point. Okay. It opened very limited and had pretty mediocre per theater average, considering what a limited theatrical run it had. And it was on a new distributor so they weren't expecting it to actually expand nationally at any point. And just on word of mouth, and I participated in this after I saw the film in theaters, I dragged my friends to go see this, a whole bunch of them, to go see the movie with me again. Nice. And that's exactly what ended up happening. The film kept expanding, and over time, a huge financial success. It cost a few $1 million and ended up making something like $50 million. And of course, just on DVD sales alone, has made tens of millions of dollars additionally.
So you might have sparked the tipping point to where
it might have been me.
Otherwise, Yeah, Nolan, or just Nolan wouldn't have had a career if it wasn't for you
I think if I
pushing.
had a
Yeah.
podcast at the time, it would have been totally.
I don't know how many people would be listening to a podcast in
That's a good point.
1998.
Yes. Well, more than the 10 people I dragged to the movie theater with me.
Right, right.
But we're jumping way ahead. But I do want to talk about Memento. We will definitely talk about it, obviously, in the next
Yeah, I think
conversation.
it isn't totally off for us to bring it up because we
No,
both were introduced to Nolan by that movie. So just at least touching on that, that's how we heard about him. And then we could have even done it in the other order or whatever. But yeah, it's definitely all part of it.
and also because following in so many ways feels like it is a dry run at something like Memento because it's
Right,
touching on so many of these themes.
right.
So
And
we'll talk
it
about
has,
Memento is a huge watershed. But first of all, I was shocked in rewatching following, forgetting how short it is. It's barely over an hour.
yeah, 69 minutes. You don't see a lot of that, but it is legit feature length. And I looked at the upside. It's like declaring it's going to take care of business without any fat. Or maybe it was just because he didn't have the funds to make anymore and he couldn't buy any more film. But it feels like he just told the story he wanted to tell and got it out there.
Yeah, and there is actually a short that I've never seen. There's like a 15-minute version with the same actor, which is like a short that tells the same story.
Oh,
And
okay.
it's interesting that he expanded a short. Oftentimes, when folks do that, the plot is very different or it seems very dragged out. Like you think to yourself, well, this
Right,
probably should have been like 30 minutes. This could have lost 5 minutes or so. Honestly, it probably could have just gotten by on just 1 hour. But I think he
right.
fills it out really well,
Oh,
mostly
yeah.
by developing the characters. It's basically a glorified student film, and I think it's very impressive for what it is.
Oh, yeah.
I can't wait to hear what your notes were on it. I have relatively few notes. Most of the things are really just meta commentary on his career in general. But what jumped out based on your notes? What really jumped out for you in this rewatch?
Well, I was telling you before we started that I took way too many notes, so I can actually give you my take on almost like every scene.
Go
Considering
for
this.
it.
But to start off with, I really appreciate the cinema verite, black and white
Mhm.
cinematography. Looks really cool. And didn't he have like a cinematographer that he used for a lot of other movies too, or am I off on that?
He does some of the cinematography here, but I believe he is his own cinematographer here. He does then work with Wally Pfister a bunch of
Okay,
times, starting with Memento, I believe. But something that jumped out here is the music. This is very reminiscent of the Memento music. And he works with
right,
this composer for quite some time until he gets into his $200 million blockbuster era. He works with this
right.
composer for a while.
Yeah, well, I think I wrote quite a ways down, but I was able to scan and find it that it was a nice score, always intense,
Yep.
but also quite a variety to it. Sometimes you get techno beats, other
Mm-hmm.
times there's
Yep.
tension building strings. Those might have been electronically produced, but they don't sound all techno like the other stuff. So, do you know, is that Nolan himself? I mean, he can't have hired too many other people in that budget. So, I don't know.
Yeah, this
Like, did he
composer.
make the music?
No, he has a composer here, the same who worked with him on Memento and Insomnia. The Prestige might have been the last time they worked together, but
Okay.
I think he may have been someone he met in film school or tangentially to film school. I think they came up together basically.
Okay. So yeah, so we start off with the movie, and he's telling somebody his story. We figure out by the end, obviously, what the framing device really is, but he's telling about what happened and how he just wanted to get a random glimpse into a random person's life, which seems like just a cool idea on its own. I wonder if that was the genesis for the whole thing. But then he gets irritated at the suggestion it's a sex thing. It made me think of a time when I was in high school and I followed someone in my car. Now, hold on for a second. It wasn't quite as extreme as what he's doing, but what happened is we were both headed, this is in Duluth, Minnesota. We were both headed in the same general vicinity. So, and we started somewhere, I guess, near each other. So we just happened to be taking all the same turns. And at a certain point, I realized that they thought I was following them. So I decided, I was a teenager at the time. I was trying to forgive myself here a little bit. I decided I actually would. And then whoever I was following started circling around blocks and stuff like that. And then I realized they were probably getting totally freaked out, and I was like, "Oh crap! Okay, I'll stop." This is before a cell phone, so they would have just been on their own, driving around, trying to. I suppose at a certain point, maybe drive to the police station or something. But that's my following story.
I've definitely had that experience also when I was younger. I remember one time I was walking home from drinking in the woods, as you will when you're a teenager.
As you do.
And there's like an abandoned train track that kind of you can walk along that takes you through all over the town. It takes you towards this grocery store. It goes to where the
Right.
park is. It goes by the pool. So in the summer, we walk this all the time. In the middle of the night,
This is in Jersey.
in Jersey, yeah. And I just got bored and I'm like, okay, I'm just going to walk home now. And rather than waiting for a ride or whatever, and just walking home in the middle of the night, and somebody was out walking their dog and they didn't know I was there. And I started to stalk them through the woods. Exactly. Like, I found it like really fascinating to be watching someone, observing someone when they don't know they're being watched, which is something is very rear window ish. I love visiting my friends in Manhattan, by the way, and they'll like point across to the other buildings and they'll say, that guy always walks around naked, that they're always fighting with each other. And like they just become exhibitionists because you just live
Right.
like that. Very different to just be wandering through the woods and run into somebody. And I had the same experience you did, where at one point I made myself known and like walked past this person walking their dog just so they wouldn't think like, oh, they've been stalking me.
Right.
But of course, because
Right. And
at that moment, I realized I am stalking this person, being a creep. So.
But hopefully they never thought you actually were or anything.
Exactly. But I thought of that immediately because I think that is when I would try to write in the city, for example, sitting in a coffee shop and just with it's probably something that he experienced himself and just looking at people and taking notes. And in this case, like he's obviously profiling people and stalking them.
Right.
But I think as a writer, you do that all the time, right? You watch people to come up with ideas.
I think I can safely say that I've seen at least 3 different, and maybe a lot more than this, but at least 3 times I've seen in like a rom-com or sort of rom-com sort of situation where the chemistry that develops between the two is where they're looking at people, strangers across the room, and they're making a story about what their life is like and what they do for a living. And you know what I'm talking about? Have you come across that trope?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of an example where the couple is doing that, which I can remember, but I can't place it. But the one thing that made me think about immediately was, have you ever seen Past Lives?
Oh, I have that like on my queue kind of thing, but I know it was a big deal about 2 years ago, maybe.
Yes.
But I have not gotten to it yet.
Yeah, and that has a really great first scene, which comes back at the very end of the film. But in the very first scene, you see the 3 protagonists of the film having a drink together, and you hear people watching them and trying to guess what their relationship to each other is. And then, of course, we watch their story over the course of the film.
Oh, okay. So it's taking that trope and then saying, well, let's find out what people like to make up and then what it really is. That's cool.
Right. Yeah, it's very good. That's a great film, by the way.
Nice. So yeah, back to following. Let's see. What do I got? Oh, one note I took early on was that I surprisingly don't ever remember seeing any of these actors, like in other projects later on, because I thought they were actually really good for such a low budget production. What did you think of the acting?
Yeah, I think that it's variable. I think that what do you call it? The shadiest, the dark-haired guy, let's just call him the dark-haired guy in case anybody doesn't want to be spoiled on this film yet. I thought it was really interesting character.
You're talking about the guy who's telling the story about following people?
No, the other one. So there's
the guy that he follows.
Yeah, the one he follows, exactly. And they have a
well-dressed guy. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. That guy has no other acting credits other than this film, which is really surprising because he seemed to be like he would have a longer career. The blonde actor, the one who's the main protagonist here, has been mostly in other Nolan films and obviously in smaller parts, but occasionally he'll pop up in some British TV series or something. When you look at his IMDb page, it seems to have acted pretty regularly and always has some small part, a speaking part in all of Nolan's films. Maybe we'll spot him in all the other films because I haven't really noticed him that much.
Wow, yeah, I thought he was able to hold up the protagonist situation there. So yeah, then we move along to he's learning about burglary and stuff, and I thought it was cool how the guy with only 1 credit apparently, how that character uses his tie during the doorbell. We've seen many times people avoiding fingerprints, but that was just a handy little maneuver.
Details. He does research because he has like little details like that in all his films.
Yeah, completely. I was just so well filled in. And again, that I've always got that asterisk in my head, like a mega low budget production. I just think you can argue forever about whether when you're ranking or grading projects against each other, whether you ought to account for the budget and everything like that. But I can't help just thinking like, wow, he had no budget and he was able to do all this stuff.
Yeah, probably shot it in his own building. They shot this over a few years, I believe.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So kind of like, I think not as long of a window of time, but like Eraserhead was shot over a very long period of time. This is, I think, a more abbreviated, like maybe a 2-year window, but he's shooting this as he's doing other things. And I'm sure all these locations were like found locations.
Right, right, for sure. When you were talking about the whole idea, like in past lives and stuff, of people imagining what other people's lives might be like, and that was a cool thing in here too with the burglar looking around people's apartments and their stuff, and is able to. I mean, I guess we don't always get verification, but he's able to make very plausible stories about how people's lives are. And then I thought it was a nice touch that when they got surprised by the woman and another guy coming back there, that he picked up that that was not her boyfriend, because
Right.
he didn't.
Mhm. Yeah.
The boyfriend or the guy she was with didn't say anything, so they had something on each other in a way that was funny.
Yeah, I think that I like that a lot. And yeah, there's a lot of thematic
then
things
we-
I want to tie in with Nolan. But yeah, let's walk through a little more of the plot itself, because
Yeah.
one of the most fascinating things about watching it is these are things that happen in all of Nolan's films, but so much of his obsessions are here in the very first film.
Yeah, for sure. So then we move along to seeing, of course, some of these are out of order chronologically and stuff. I haven't really done. I don't have the string attached to.
Well,
all
the story is
little,
out of
pins
order.
or-
The story itself is out of order. Another thing that he loves to do.
Right. That's the thing. So, but then we're in a bar. But this is what my notes are, at least in the order of the way it was in the movie. But so he's in a bar and he says, "Beer, please." And I just had to write down the note. Like, does anyone actually do this in real life? I see it in movies all the time. But I feel like an actual bartender would be like, "What kind of beer?"
Beer me.
Beer me, yeah. And then we keep having the discussion. He's talking with the blonde woman, and the main character keeps referring to the owner of the bar, or at least who's been identified as the owner by the woman he's talking to, as a bald guy. Did you think he looks like a bald guy?
Yeah, I mean, no. Baldish.
I guess maybe a little thinning or a little receding, but like I was like, did Nolan have that in the script and just forget to take it out when he got the actual okay. But yeah, then I wrote a bunch of stuff about the manual typewriter, which is then funny because later in the movie, the other guy, the sort of professional criminal, comments on when they go back to his apartment that, oh, this is just somebody who's stylizing themselves as the idea of a writer rather than, because this is what I was speculating I would like to see. Clearly, it's not a period piece like you might think from seeing the typewriter, but then so what I had written before we even got to that other part, I said, oh, I guess the typewriter's affectation, like he imagines himself as Norman Mailer or something. And then that was great when the burglar then said a similar idea.
Yeah, it's actually very sophisticated when you think about it's pretty simple, by the way, on the surface, the story itself. And obviously borrowing from a lot of other noirs, which he loves to do anyway. But
Yeah.
I love how the sophisticated stuff is and unspoken, although I got a little irritated later on where he overtly says things that we have already inferred, but I guess he is trying to think about his audience. I mean, it's his very first film. The fact that we know, of course, that he is in his apartment and then he wants to have a read of himself. And then you wonder, Cobb, by the way, that's the character's name, the other character, when Cobb has this assessment of him, as you're watching it, you're thinking, is he aware that he's in his room, or is this pure read of him? And once again, this is just my personal taste. I like not knowing better than him laying it out and being like, oh, how pathetic he was when we went to his apartment. He tried to pretend like it was something. I like better not knowing what's going on in his head.
Yeah, that's fair. I didn't think at all when I first watched, I didn't think at all that he knew. I mean, obviously, it was obvious that the main character, who I guess gives him a fake name, but he doesn't really have a name in the credits. But like, I knew that obviously he was pulling something here. I guess he just wanted to see what Cobb would say about his place.
Exactly.
Or whatever.
Exactly.
But like, I really didn't think that Cobb was in on what was going on and messing with them. But that was pretty interesting to find out later that. But you say you would have preferred to not know that he was messing with them about that?
Yeah, I would have preferred him to have to work it out myself, right? Which I think we're jumping ahead yet again, but what I like so much about Memento is to think about that film and how he doesn't ever tell us exactly what's happening in each character's minds. Like
Right.
even the really big moments when you're like, why does he make this decision at this moment, the most
I
important decision in that film? And we are not clear about it. And I like the
right.
tension of trying to understand the character rather than
I
having
get
him tell us explicitly.
I see your point, but I guess the one thing that comes to mind, if we changed it the way you're talking about, we wouldn't get to hear Cobb making fun of the guy for having a brand new mat that he had probably just bought, like a doormat
Yeah,
he probably
yes.
just bought to put the key under and everything. I love that
Yes.
little bit there. It's horrible that we're rooting for the main guy, the guy that's narrating or whatever, and I felt angry on his behalf for that, but it just deliciously evil commentary from Cobb.
Over the course of the film, one of the places they invade turns out to be the blonde's apartment, which we know we're trying to guess which one of these was hers at some point
Right.
anyway. And that's a fun twist on things. But it also makes you wonder from the standpoint of the police, how many of these are crimes that they've committed if he's breaking into places of people who know they're being broken into, right? It's as if he is only letting the protagonist break the rules, right? Because he's always breaking
Right.
into his home, which of course turns out to be
Right.
and of course breaking into her home, which she anticipated anyway, right? So it's interesting twist.
Right. Well, there's really, I think, an open question, and this is more in the realm of what you're talking about leaving it for the viewer to puzzle out. But there's, I think, a real question at the end of whether Cobb is really normally a burglar at all.
Right.
Right? Like
Exactly.
he's a
That this is
henchman or
all
something, some
right.
or kind of mid-level mobster guy is what he really is, I think.
Yeah, and that's the other thing that's very funny about watching the film, because to be honest, the resolutions is maybe the weakest part of the whole entire film. So I didn't really remember it, although I remembered the rest of the film, because what's so intriguing about it as you're watching it is knowing who's lying to who.
Right.
So you're like, is it like when the blonde is like, look at the bald guy and buy me a drink, and is he getting jealous and he
Right.
doesn't pay attention to her? And when I read it this time, because I had forgotten the actual resolution, I thought to
Yeah.
myself, well, that's not her boyfriend. Like, this is all part of his setup of this guy, right?
Right.
That guy's just a random guy in there. And she made up this entire relationship. But it turns out that a lot of things they do tell him by the end are actually true.
Right. Now, I would say if you're criticizing the sort of reversal at the end, I would say I really liked we could say penultimate reversal, and then the very final one, maybe not as much. What do you think? Is
Yeah,
that kind of where you're at?
yeah, I agree with that first twist where this is all set up and they're trying to frame him for this
Right.
crime. That I really like. And that is what I inferred earlier on, because that plays into that whole idea that she is part of the setup. That's not really her boyfriend in the bar. And then, of course, the final twist where actually, no, that guy was a gangster. He has committed this crime. Cobb is his hitman. And now she's next on the list. So all of that was a little, it's very film noir, by the way, but it was a little like unnecessary, I think. I liked
Right.
better the idea of this betrayal, and he basically takes the fall for this, and he's been played the whole entire time. So
Yeah.
I like that better for me, and it feels more of that kind of classic noir.
Right. And you talk about classic noirs. One of my top 10 favorite films of all time is Double Indemnity.
Yeah.
And of course, you got Barbara Stanwyck in there, but I thought this woman she's no Stanwyck, but I thought she was
Right.
doing pretty well in that. But then as she turns out, it's like she's not really well, I guess she is still, because she still lied to the other guy
Yeah,
and
she's still
everything.
the femme fatale. Yeah.
But she's manipulated into being a femme fatale in a sense. So yeah, I don't know about that. I think the biggest problem that I had with any of the mechanisms of any of these twists and stuff and the femme fatale aspect is that I don't really understand why she would tell our original guy all about the plot against him. Like, what possible gain could she have from doing that? She just feel guilty and want to tell him? It just seemed like wahaha, I'm just gonna, like, I feel a little sorry for you, but I'm also just gonna let you know how, like, totally pathetically you're set up. Like, why would she do that?
Yeah, that part of it doesn't really make sense, which is part of what makes the ending a little unsatisfying.
Right, yeah, but they had to get it off. There's somehow, I guess, and they had a certain amount of her and Cobb discussing all about it, but maybe he felt that would just be a little too much if they're just sitting there like, let's talk about all the shady stuff we did to him,
Right.
like
Yeah.
lay it all out.
Yeah, I think that's part of it, is just having someone to explain the plot to, in
Right.
case the audience missed it, for that same reason. Because imagine having that, what her and Cobb are going to be like, rubbing their hands together, like, ha ha ha, we were so smart.
Right, right, exactly. So let's see what other notes I. Oh, and I loved how he ultimately couldn't resist looking at the photos, which actually surprised her. She
Yes.
thought he was
Yeah.
gonna. And I just recently, as we talked about before, I just recently rewatched parts of the Tom Ripley movie for around the same time, and I couldn't get Philip Seymour Hoffman out of my head.
Yeah.
How's the peeping?
How's the peeping? Yeah, I love that. He's so great in that film.
Yeah, it was so good. I really loved, as we talked about, that and the miniseries. I know you didn't like the guy that was playing Freddy in that one, but I thought they were both really good in their own ways.
And they're very different. I mean, that's Sting's.
Right, Sting's child. I guess we
Yeah.
just say gender neutral, whatever, offspring. But yeah, I thought he had a cool way about him. But it's hard to beat Philip Seymour Hoffman, one of the greatest actors.
It's just
of all
maybe it's
time.
just because obviously he goes in there like he's so much of a different energy,
Right.
and I'm waiting for something to top that, which of course is unfair. It's completely unfair to have that expectations.
Right. Well, it's a thankless role.
Exactly. Like, how do you follow that up?
So let's see. I'm almost down to the end of my notes, but I mentioned that one of the things I did find delicious. I guess we're talking about penultimate and the different levels of twist. I think I really liked it again when we get to the very end and discover that he's sitting there talking to this cop, and he realizes that he himself is aided in the meticulous series of steps required to seal his doom. And he even walked right into the police station.
Exactly. Yes.
So that was pretty tasty, I thought. And getting back to the actors, the cop character is a really small role, crucial role, though obviously it's a framing device and providing that final nail in the coffin. I thought that actor really played what he had very well and made a memorable impression. I don't know. He looks a little more familiar, like maybe he has done some other stuff, but I don't know. You could probably tell me.
Which one is this?
The guy who plays the cop, who basically is listening to the whole thing and then reveals to him that he's really screwed.
The cop is Christopher Nolan's father, believe it or not.
Oh, okay. Wow. So he's not normally a professional actor, or he was?
You know what? I was about to say he doesn't have, but apparently he was an actor. I'm actually clicked his link on Wikipedia, and he was acting all throughout the 60s and 70s, doing a lot of TV shows, for example.
Okay, yeah, because I thought he looked a little familiar, and also just that would have been the most shocking of all, because he had such an assured way about him that I would be really shocked if someone could pull that off without having some experience. So that's cool.
Did you watch Person of Interest?
I think I might have just seen the pilot of that, but I didn't see much of it.
He was in 3 seasons of that show.
Oh, okay. There we go.
You know about the connection there, right? That Nolan's brother is the showrunner for Person of Interest.
Oh, no, I didn't know that. I know that they work together, or at least, or maybe it's not together, but it's his brother, I know, is involved with Westworld. So I don't know if Christopher
Correct.
is. But...
Yeah.
Okay.
And they co-wrote. I mean, they have written some scripts together. Most notably, we'll talk about it in much more detail next week, because Memento.
Right.
They wrote Memento together. Yeah.
And then there was a TV show a couple of years ago where it was like this futuristic sort of VR kind of a thing, right? Wasn't that the Nolans, or at least one of the Nolans involved with that too?
Oh, yeah, The Peripheral, which you talked about.
Right.
I did not like that show very much, and I followed the entire show here on the podcast week to week because our ratings were huge. Oh. And I was like really not liking the show, but I'm like, I guess I have to keep doing this.
All right, so now it's revealed Victor's just a pimp of his own success or whatever.
What else can I do?
Oh, that's pretty funny. But yeah, I only watched the pilot of that one, and it seemed like, I'm a little vague on it now, but it seemed like it was trading a little more than I enjoy on the kind of like I don't know, just overdone stereotypes of like Southern kind of.
Yes, that was the roughest part for me. But also, I didn't like the way they represented the future as well. There was a lot of components that didn't work for me. But yeah, very much that family, that Southern family, it just in general it rubbed me the wrong way. Especially when you have British actors playing them and stuff. It's very
right. And I mean, it made me think in a weird way, even though people think of them as opposites, but they're still all part of flyover country. But I'm hugely into the Coens, and overall, surprisingly, given this, that I really love the movie Fargo, but it is hampered to me to a fair extent by the bad Minnesota accents, because I lived in Minnesota for many years. So it is just really it's really bad, really like just over the top and not at all accurate. So it seems contemptuous towards flyover country. I guess the Coens are from Minnesota, so maybe.
Well, I mean, they were from Minnesota, exactly. Yeah.
Right.
But I mean, you think about Raising Arizona, which I also love. Obviously, all that is a caricature as well.
Yeah, that's true. But there's definitely a little of that, or a lot of that, kind of like, let's just hold up the middle Americans to ridicule type of thing.
Yeah, which oftentimes feels like that's the case, right? All the time.
Yeah. I mean, I guess we don't represent that much of the country's population-wise, so they can get by with it without offending, unless you're trying to be more like Paramount-y and appeal to the heartland people, and then you got to be more careful, I suppose.
Now that you brought up the Coens, one of my first things here on the notes is, first of all, this is my taste, but apparently is the taste of a lot of folks. I find it very interesting that some of the most well-regarded, and even myself, my favorite filmmakers of this generation and just in general, primarily make film noirs. So David Lynch may be my favorite filmmaker of all times, primarily making film noirs, although his own versions of noirs, but of course noirs. Coen Brothers, big, huge fans of the Coen
Blue
Brothers.
Velvet is his masterpiece. I don't know that I would have necessarily thought of some of the others as being so much noir, but definitely Blue Velvet is.
Well, Mulholland Drive is
noir.
definitely it's deconstructed to a large extent, but you think about that, you have the poster of Gloria, you have the femme fatale, of course, who has forgotten her memory, lost her memory. But of course, that is a trope in many noirs as well. So
right,
definitely are. I mean, in aspects of all his films have noirish components. But the Coen Brothers, of course, pretty much every film they've ever made is a noir.
Wow, that's quite a statement. I know they've made plenty, but all of them, really? Okay.
I think you can read almost all their films as noir. So maybe Raising Arizona, perhaps, we wouldn't put that as in the category of noir. But the vast majority of their films would.
Without going through meticulously, it feels to me like it's like 70%, but then still 30% that are not noirs. But I don't know. I'll have to give that, when we get offline, I'll have to give that some more careful.
We could circle back on that. My math might be a little off, but you think about Fargo. I mean, you think about No Country for Old Men. You think about the ones that come to mind immediately definitely fall into that realm. You have the gangster movie of Miller's Crossing, but that has aspects of noir as well, and gangster films in general do. So I may not be 100% on the mark with that one.
Yeah. Oh, I wouldn't have fought you on Miller's Crossing at all, which is my favorite of theirs, by the way.
Blood Simple, of course, is like Blood Simple is the most very stereotypical noir.
Sure. Yeah, for sure. But then I'm thinking of like, I don't know, like
Burn After Reading.
Well, yeah. But even ones that I really liked, like True Grit, Western.
Well, that's true. That wouldn't necessarily put them in the noir category, that's for sure.
Right. And then what was the one, the Hollywood? Well, now that I'm thinking about it, I could see how there's some noir elements to that. There's the Hollywood one with the exclamation point in the title. What's that?
Hail Caesar. Hail Caesar.
Hail Caesar, right. I can see it now that I'm thinking about it.
I mean, they're indebted to the noir in all of their films.
Right.
Because there are noir elements to even their comedies and aspects of it like that. Like The Lady Killers is a throwback to a remake of one of
What about Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
That's a good point. I'm trying to think if I could correlate that to noir, maybe some of the design choices, but yeah, that's more like a chain gang type. Well, I mean, I guess it's a few different things.
I have to admit too, I don't always feel like I have the best handle on what exactly people are meaning by noir. Like, I feel like I'm safe if it's like a 1930s hard-boiled detective or something, but then it clearly means something beyond that, and I have trouble quite getting a handle on what that is.
That's where a lot of the terminology comes from, is the noir, not just in its visual style. I'd say one thing that I think is the case, regardless of whether it's a contemporary noir or old school noir, is that there's always a detective who's investigating. There's usually a femme fatale, but not always. And then there's usually like a misunderstanding of, and almost like an accidental, self-destructive, ironic twist to what happens to the investigator himself. And when I say it's a detective, of course it can be explicitly a detective, but not always.
Sometimes or it can be Stewart in, like you're saying earlier, in Rear Window.
Exactly. Like sometimes you get lured into inadvertently. And Hitchcock obviously made noirs, but I don't really consider Rear Window a noir, but it of course has a very significant influence there as well. all
Right.
the moral ambiguity and all the questionable behavior. Oftentimes, the protagonist is very morally ambiguous, like you get introduced to in Blue Velvet. Our protagonist is a peeping Tom. And then, of
Yeah.
course, we have Rear Window, we have Jimmy Stewart again. So all these things are in conversation with each other.
Well,
But I
and
find,
then
yeah,
the one thing that also confused me is I think when I was starting to get into films and try to learn all these terms and everything, I thought for sure that this must all be talking about like noir, meaning like it's at night and there's like shadowy and all this kind of stuff. But then you'll see discussions of noir where they say that like the super bright sun of Southern California fits perfectly into the idea of noir. And I'm
right.
like,
Yeah,
okay,
like you
well,
think about The Long Goodbye or something like that, or Under the Silver Lake, if you've ever seen that more recent contemporary
no, I
version of
haven't.
that.
But I mean, I speak French, and noir literally means like black or dark. So I'm just like, how can it be bright sun? Also, I don't get how
Right. Well, that's where I think
that.
that it's expanded its definition. Of course, noir was primarily talking about these detective stories that were shot in black and white, usually
Okay,
to budgetary constraints. But of course,
right,
color already existed. The vast majority of films were being shot in color at that point, but not these noirs. So the French called it noir. But as color started to get injected into these films, they still called it noir because it was more about the dark themes of the
right.
material more than the
Okay,
actual just the shadow of that kind of German expressionist indebted to that type of style. But the reason I bring that up is some of the filmmakers I was going to bring up today, not only the Coen brothers, of course, not only Lynch, which oftentimes has really vibrant colors, like in Blue Velvet, for example,
right.
and that's very much a noir type story, obviously. But of course, Nolan's films are practically all noir or very heavily noir indebted. And also, another one of your favorite directors is David Fincher, very
All right.
noirish in all of his films. But
Yeah,
of
I
course,
can see
shot in
that for
color,
sure.
usually shot in color.
I can see that for sure.
This is extremely noir, considering it's not only in its plot, not only with the femme fatale and the twist at the end, and the unknowing the detective who is basically walking into his own trap, which was Double
Right,
Indemnity or any other version of the story you want to compare it to, and also
right.
in black and white. It's got
Yeah,
everything.
yeah, yeah. Well, I wonder if I can sort. I keep track of my movies on Flickchart. I wonder if I can sort by noirs. So I'll just try that right now while we're talking. Go ahead and say some of the other thematic stuff you're thinking about. Vamp for me, and I'll find out.
Sure. First of all, a tool you might want to look at for sure, you're going to love this, is a website called They Shoot Pictures, Don't They? Have you ever heard of this website?
That does not. I mean, of course, it's hard to be sure if I've heard of that or if I just know the movie. They shoot horses, don't they? And then
Right.
there's the Gilmore Girls episode. They shoot Gilmore or something. I don't know if you're a Gilmore guy, but
I actually loved the Gilmore Girls, but I'm not
there
a
you
completist.
go. Okay,
I watched it when it was on TV. I've never watched it retroactively when they were all
okay,
available to me. I just watched it when it
oh,
was
okay,
on TV back in the day. I would watch it
okay.
and
See,
always enjoyed it. I loved the relationship between the two of
yeah, I
them.
didn't discover it at all until 2007 when I started dating my second wife, and that's like her favorite show of all time. So she made sure that I went through her DVD collection and watched all of it. But so it sounds like you didn't do the whole Netflix deal then either.
No, I never have, but I probably would appreciate it if I had.
Yeah.
I did. Maybe something to watch with my wife. That's actually not a bad idea. So, some interesting things I thought about as I was watching the film. It's really interesting when you look at someone's career, like the Coen brothers, who just keep remaking the same film over and over again, pretty much in very different clothing, but the themes are always the same. And Nolan, of course, having the same obsessions throughout his career. And you see almost all of them here. There's the stories told out of order. You
Right.
have the unreliable narrator. You have the noirish unknowability of what's actually happening. There is inception here, like you mentioned. He basically is incepted to turn himself in by the end of the film.
Oh, that's an interesting point. I hadn't thought of that.
And of course,
Gotcha.
Inception was like he wanted Inception to be made before Memento at a much smaller scale, obviously, and he
Hmm.
couldn't get it made. So that's when he wrote the Memento script, which of course has some of the same themes in it again, because they could get that one made.
He had that kicking around that long beforehand.
Yeah,
Wow.
apparently very early in the going.
And on a lower budget, he was just going to have what people describing the dreams
Oh, I
mostly,
can't
or
imagine what that would have been like, to be honest with you. It was like
yeah.
his favorite film of all times is A Year in Marienbad. Have you ever seen that?
I'm familiar with it as considered a great part of the canon, but no, I haven't seen it.
So I think it would probably be something way more surreal like that. Like I think he probably saw himself as a way more experimental filmmaker early in his
Right.
career versus what he's become over time.
Right. But I mean, he can make it surreal if people were just saying odd things. And I guess maybe a little more like Linklater's Waking Life. Have you seen that?
Right. I mean, if you've seen Last Year in Marienbad, it is
I like that
they're
too.
at this beautiful French villa, and these characters, different characters, keep running into each other in different contexts, wearing different clothes, playing different roles,
Ah,
but they just
okay.
keep
That
saying the
sounds
same
cool.
dialogue over and over and over again. And then it's just the same
Uh-huh.
dialogue repeated in different people saying it to each other in different contexts. And so I think it was
Okay.
like thinking like you can imagine something like that where they're in a maybe like a giant estate and the similar plot is playing out without this giant, I mean, obviously a sci-fi construct, but probably much
Right.
less complexity to it all.
Okay.
Less
Huh.
gunfights too.
Right. So yeah, overall, I really thought I wrote down that it's a cliche, but I would call this the classic, remarkably assured debut.
Yes. Yep. Very much so. And it is impressive because you think about, I mean, unless you think about like Blood Simple, which is an incredible debut film also. It's
Right.
rare,
That's,
not always filmmakers like hit the ground running. I mean,
but I mean,
Eraserhead.
in fairness, though, they had to have a lot more money to make that than Nolan had for this one,
Oh
right?
yeah, there's
Or
like
they just make more of it.
this is incredible a feat just in and of itself that you could even make a film at this scale, which is pretty impressive.
Right.
And now I think the Odyssey cost $250 million. It's the most expensive film ever. So I'm like, well, we've gone to another extreme there.
Wow.
That's before advertising. So it is immense, though. I mean, if you've seen the trailer, which I have allowed myself to see because Nolan never spoils his films in his trailer, allowed myself to watch it. And I mean, it's just
Okay.
immense.
Yeah. Well, as we've talked about, I avoid trailers unless I know I'm not going to see something or if I've already seen it. So I haven't seen that, but I'm definitely excited to look forward to that. When is it going to come out? It says it's going to be a summer movie or what?
July, mid July.
Okay.
So, which is usually his slot for opening there.
All right.
I think we can wait to rank the films when we get to the end.
Right.
But did you rank this higher this time around, or how did you feel?
I think it ended up being pretty similar. I normally look at it on my laptop, and I don't have that here. I'm over at my girlfriend's house to see if I. It actually might be better. You have that spreadsheet, right?
I might actually have it here
Okay.
because I have my computer here. There it is. Alan's movie list. I got it.
All right, there we go.
So let me remove all the filters, and then director is Nolan. Okay, so for following, oh, he gave it an A minus. Pretty impressive
Yeah.
score.
And if people, this is, I guess, the first time I'm going to be on the air, so to speak. So they need to know that I'm not one of those people that ranges from A plus to A minus. The movies that I like and would give a thumbs up recommendation to goes all the way down to C minus, that it's barely worth recommending. But when you're up at A minus, it's very high.
I'm just looking at your scores here. I'm not going to spoil them ahead of time, but
Okay.
the R-rated ones score higher.
I know that. I think it says something about me.
Seems to be a pattern.
Yeah.
Okay, a couple more observations about the film that I thought was interesting. Most of the way through his career, not once he got through the Batman films or maybe aside from the Batman films, but for a while there, he always had a blonde protagonist that was styled like him and very much like if you see how he dresses very dapper.
Well, yeah.
And,
That's so funny. That's the exact word I was just about to blurt out as dapper. He's a dapper gentleman type.
he's always in a suit behind the camera.
It's reminiscent, actually, of what's the Beatles producer. He was ways older than them, but he had that distinguished. You know what I'm talking about?
Martin?
George Martin. Yeah, he has a distinguished gentleman style about him.
Yeah, if you think about Following and you think about Memento and you think about Inception, but there's other examples as well, that they're all very much like intentionally they are his surrogate in the film. So it's very interesting to think about him where he was at that point in his life, that he's casting himself. Obviously, in this film, it's very easy to see him as this struggling artist or just an artist who's just experimenting with
Right. Well, I was just about
storytelling.
to say, because it's actually Cobb who's the well-dressed,
Right.
more dapper-looking guy in this. But,
Although he becomes the dapper dressed eventually.
That's true. That's fair. Yeah.
He
And
also
then
loves Bowie, by the way, and of course put Bowie in the Prestige at one point. And this guy has a very Bowie look to him early on.
Oh, yeah, I can see that for sure. Bowie also had many dapper moments, not always, but mostly a dapper sort of a gent himself.
A couple more themes I want to touch on. There is always someone who is pulling off a heist or a con. There's always a very elaborate plot that is playing out and something is being stolen or the wool is being pulled. I mean, even when you think
Right.
about Dunkirk,
And
for
then in
example.
Westworld, it becomes too labyrinthine and
Yeah, and that's his brother, which I completely agree that I think they need each other to balance each other out
right.
because his brother on his own, it gets way too complicated. And the other thing I was going to say, as far as them being fascinated by cons in general, is they have a third brother. This third brother has gone to jail for being a con man and for potentially murdering somebody. That's what he's accused of anyway, as
Right.
part of one of these cons. So I can't help but see these cons in his films and not think that there is something about him trying to either understand his brother or maybe knowing what his brother was like and exploring it through the films themselves.
Oh, okay. I can see that.
So a psychological aspect of
Analyzing the guy here.
that. And I'm also very curious about their upbringing, where his father had two families, right? He has a British accent because he lived with his mother in England, and his brothers lived in Chicago and don't have British accents because they
Oh,
lived
okay.
here. And then they weren't close. He was not close with his brother until they started working together later in life. And that's interesting too. I haven't really, maybe I should try to psychoanalyze his work through that as well, but I haven't seen that aspect of it in his
Okay.
work. But it's another interesting thing to just put a pin in that and think if we
Right.
any of that in the rest of the films.
Yeah, that's good. We've got all these others to watch, so you've given me some good ideas to kind of keep in the back of my mind while watching.
And of course, one of the biggest themes in all of his work, pretty much every single one of them, is this whole idea of identity. There's always somebody who is lying about their own identity. Obviously, we have Cobb here and everybody's identity. We're not sure who they are. We
Right.
don't even know if we should really trust who the lead character is. We're going to see that in Memento. We're going to see that in Insomnia. We're going to see that overtly in the Batman films, like literally what the Batman films are about. The Prestige, you name it, pretty much. Maybe not Dunkirk. Well, Dunkirk, there's somebody who's lying about who they are, right? So, I mean, pretty much in every film.
Yeah, I was about to raise Dunkirk, but then I guess you're right. Oppenheimer, who's false identity.
That's a good question. Yeah, that's the one thing, because Oppenheimer is historical. Maybe it is there. Maybe I just need to rewatch the film with that filter in place. But because it's like a biopic, a lot of what I described here is probably not going to hold up there. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it'll be a noir when we look at it again.
But yeah, that does seem to happen, like when someone's usually got an MO, but they're writing their own stuff, and then it's whether somebody else wrote the script or it has to adhere to a certain amount of historical accuracy, then that could mess up the patterns that you'll otherwise see.
And one thing that I'm going to be critical of here, and I'm very curious to see how this is going to play with Odyssey, considering it has so many more female characters, is that the one thing that honestly did not bother me when I was just becoming a diehard Nolan fanboy early in my fandom or appreciation of him, but has started to bother me more as I've gotten older, is that he does not write good female characters. And those characters really sink or swim, depending on whether he has good casting. And like Emily Blunt in Oppenheimer, I think makes the best of like a really thankless role, I should say. But it has some really powerful scenes, but in general, not a great role there for women. Maybe he needs to have a female co-writer in the future.
I mean, you're not shocking me by saying this because I see people say it about him all the time, but I don't know. I'm struggling with that a little bit. I mean, I feel like the wife in Oppenheimer was a good character, even in a story that's hard to bring in a ton of women for just because of the historical aspect of it. But then, I mean, obviously something like Dunkirk, there's not much.
There's not much room for women in that one. Yeah, well, that's understandable for sure.
But you're right. So we've got a couple there that are World War II oriented. I don't know if that's like a particular interest, but he's at least got 2 movies about World War II. Then I'm thinking Carrie-Anne Moss played a really good character in Memento. I thought the blonde woman in this movie was a good character too. I don't know.
I think she's a little bit of a cipher. That's part of the reason I wrote that down. But I do want to circle back to when we discussed Memento, because what I brought up there was specifically that I think that it's not that they're always bad performances. I think that the character sinks or swims based on how good the performer is. And I completely agree. I think that Carrie-Anne Moss in Memento could have been a terrible character, like just a non-character, pretty much a placeholder
Just
character.
a for the plot. Or,
Exactly. And she is so complex and so
yeah,
fantastic. And I mean, we can talk about her because I thought she was going to have this incredible career, given she had The Matrix and then 1 year later made Memento, and just knocked me out in both performances and really did
right.
not have the career I expected to have after that.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, I'm really glad to hear that. I mean, not glad for her sake because it's the case, but when that Star Wars show came out, I think it was last year, maybe it's been a couple of years now, but the fairly recent one that she was in, do you remember what that was called?
The Acolyte, was that the
The
one?
Acolyte, right. So there was this whole thing that was among the groups that I frequent who are into, I guess you'd say, genre content, nerd culture kind of stuff, sci-fi and superhero, Star Wars certainly. That among that whole crowd, people were going nuts, saying like, "Wait, you can't put Carrie-Anne Moss on your poster." Like, spoiler for the first episode of The Acolyte, but then kill off her character right away. And then it turned out she was around a fair bit in
She
flashback.
comes back, right? Yeah.
But like she has just gone pretty like from the first scene, so it's not that much of a spoiler, but I'm pretty sure it's the first scene she's killed and then she doesn't show up for like 3 episodes or something as far as any kind of flashback. I don't think that's my memory of it. So people are getting so exercised about that. And then I started posting like, well, okay, I don't know if she's quite the big star that you seem to be asserting that she is. Like people are saying, well, you can't do this to Tom Cruise or something like along those lines. And I'm like, I think you might be in a little bit of a bubble if you think that people were in high dudgeon that I would ever dare to say such a thing about Queen Carrie-Anne Moss, but I started just pasting up some of her IMDb, and I'm like, whoa, these are not,
Yeah.
these are
She really
not big
faded out
titles.
very quickly. Yeah.
She was busy, but it was a lot of really like low level kind of stuff. So it is sad.
Which is sad. I mean, I really think like, why is it so hard sometimes for people to that I really like that they can't really put a career together? And sometimes I just don't think they're even working anymore. But like you said, you go to their IMDb, I'm like, oh, they've been working consistently. I just haven't seen any of this. That's all.
Right. They're like the big star in the small pond and all these other
Right.
productions.
Oftentimes with women, they start families and inevitably end up the primary child rearing. And yeah, and they just disappear, or they don't necessarily disappear. They work consistently, but they'll be on a TV show, for example,
Right.
that is close to their home and a convenient schedule to keep. And then they
Right.
just disappear into that for 5 or 6 years. And they
Right. And you can make pretty decent money doing that, but
sure,
then most of the
absolutely.
country doesn't really think that they're back to whatever happened to so and so type of thing. Yeah.
I mean, I just saw the new Sam Raimi movie with Rachel McAdams in it, and she's so incredible in that and looks so stunning at 47 years old or whatever she is now.
Right.
And so she's having so much fun. And of
He
course,
looks
she's been
stunning.
in.
Doesn't really look stunning at the beginning of the movie,
Oh,
which is purposeful, of course. But
did you watch it?
yeah, I saw it.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. It's so amazing that they make her look pretty dowdy early on in that film. And
Yeah.
then only when she's on the island and she's slimmed down, I guess they're making it look like she's slimmed down. She basically just took her clothes off and she's
Right.
walking in her
Right.
underwear.
Right.
And her hair is like sun bleached. And I was like, damn, look at her now.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah. That actually turned out to be out of, I think, 7 or 8 Sam Raimi movies I've seen. That actually turned out to be my third favorite, only bested by the first 2 Spider-Man movies, because a lot of times the Raimi that other people love, I'm not as hugely into. And so I was a little skeptical going to this, but I ended up liking it quite a bit.
Yeah, I did too. And parts of it were, I didn't know if I was going to get into it. Like the plane crash is a little silly
Right.
intentionally. So I'm like, I don't know if I'm on board with this tone. But
Well, yeah.
really, I think because she is exactly at the same tone point that he is, it really makes the film
Right.
really
Well, I
fantastic.
wrote down that there's 2 things that have inhibited me from being like, I mean, it's considered in many quarters to be sacrilege to not be like a complete Sam Raimi fanboy. You probably noticed that
Yeah.
people revere him in certain very online kind of spaces, but he has 2 elements to his work that often drag him down for me. And one is that he likes to, I guess, gross the viewer out, and I'm
Yes.
not really such a fan of being grossed out. And then that he puts in, along with all the horror and darkness and whatever, he puts in these lighthearted bits, and sometimes they work, but sometimes they just seem goofy. Like, whoa,
Yes.
dude, what are you doing? So there's a little of that sprinkled in, but I guess I'd say I really, really liked the first couple acts of that movie. Then the third act I thought was not as strong, but then I thought the very, very end, like the last minute or two, redeemed it a little
So
bit. So,
great. Yes, I agree. The same thing. Like I felt like the third act was going a little more generic, but then we just really landed it perfectly at the end.
yeah, like you can save a lot of goodwill when you put something right at the end that salvages a lot of
Yeah,
what you can do.
exactly. When I was talking about it on the podcast earlier this week, I told Darren it was a 5-star, 3-star movie. The bar on it is relatively low, but it's
Right,
exactly the movie it wants to be. So
right,
I give it credit for that for sure. So,
right. That makes sense. Yeah, so it's unambitious, but it nails. I think probably the ultimate 5-star, 3-star movie that now that you're making me think of that whole very interesting kind of category was what was it called? It was I know it's from 2018 because the only reason I saw it is I had one of those movie pass cards. Did you get into that at that time?
no, I have an AMC Plus now, but I never did
Oh,
the.
right. Okay. Well, that was quite a party, but it was a movie called Game Night. Have you ever seen that?
Oh yes, absolutely
Yeah,
yes.
like to me that's like the ultimate 5-star, 3-star movie because it isn't trying to be any kind of cinematic masterpiece, but it just so perfectly
Oh, I love it.
nails that type of movie.
And Rachel McAdams incredible in that as well
Oh,
for sure.
right. There you go.
That actually circles back to where I was going in bringing up Rachel McAdams in general was that she was someone who I'm like, wow, she hasn't worked as much and then reemerged in recent years. And then I looked at her IMDb and I'm like, oh no, she worked that time consistently. Of course, she had a family and such.
Yeah,
But when I saw her in Game Night, I felt like, oh, she's back. But she'd been
right,
working that entire time. I just hadn't seen any of the stuff she
right.
made.
Refresh my memory. What did she make her bones on earlier than
Oh,
that?
Mean Girls. She's so incredible.
Okay,
And she made a bunch of rom coms, which I probably didn't watch very much of.
right. Yeah, I could totally see her having her rom-com era.
Yeah, iconic
Well,
in Mean Girls, of course.
okay. Nice. Yeah. Well, I don't know how we got into Rachel McAdams from following,
I
but
think it was from Carrie-Anne Moss. I was going to circle
right.
back to
Okay.
someone who disappeared for a while,
There we go.
but and I think everybody loves seeing her back now. But I mean, it never happened for Carrie-Anne Moss for some reason. I'm not sure why.
Yeah. So, I mean, did she even get to be in other Christopher Nolan movies? I can't think of.
I don't think so.
Huh.
Unfortunately.
Weird. Maybe they had a falling out or something. I mean, it's wild speculation, but
Well, the other thing that's interesting is you think about Guy Pearce. How has Guy Pearce disappeared from? Nolan has recycled all his cast in so many movies.
right. He also seemed like he was going to become a big star. That didn't really happen either.
He's had a really interesting career because he's one of my favorite actors, and he will just disappear into Australian movies and such for a period of
Right.
time, and then I won't see him at all for 5 years in a row, and then he'll suddenly be. He was nominated for an Academy Award for The Brutalist. He shows up in HBO series and gets Emmy wins and
That's true.
nominations.
Yeah. He has done more than, I mean, at the risk again of angering the type of people that were so insistent that I was wrong about her and online. But yeah, I think he's definitely done a lot more than Carrie-Anne Moss has over the interim.
And it's still valid for the fact that you see him early in his career. You think about Memento, you think about LA Confidential,
Right,
and
right.
you think he's going to be
really,
like the man. He's going to be the Russell Crowe. It's going to be Russell
yeah,
Crowe
he's
and
gonna
him both.
Russell Crowe, like Leo DiCaprio. Yeah.
Right. And he kept popping up. He was in Iron Man 3. He's very good in that, by the way.
Oh, right. Yeah, he was great in that.
And he shows up here and there. So he's definitely always working. He's been nominated for multiple Academy Awards. He's not like invisible and much more high profile than Carrie-Anne Moss, and he's been in Marvel films. He's been in very big budget films. But then he'll make an Iron Man 3 and then go make a spy series, a detective series
Right.
in Australia for 3 years.
One for me, one for you kind of idea.
A weird career he's had.
But he's in a movie that I will raise as an example of why you shouldn't aspire to make a movie be too realistic, because this movie that he's in, I think, is probably the most realistic movie I've ever seen. That kind of drags it down to being like a C+ type of movie. Can you guess which one? You say you're a big fan of his career, so can you guess which one I'm talking about?
It's too realistic to. Is
Yeah,
it a period?
just
Is it a period piece?
no. It's just kind of contemporary interactions between people and stuff.
Not like results. Is it results?
Results, yes, that's it.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, which I later found out. I'm like, I had made this observation that it was like things would play out. You'd think, something like, oh, this is a movie, so it's this kind of interaction they have about this thing is going to turn into some whole big conflict, and then it's just like, no, that's just like being real life. It just kind of fades out and doesn't really become anything. It is very realistic, like I said, but it just doesn't seem very dramatic.
Yeah, I've seen it and I did like it, but like you said, it doesn't really connect because I like to be convinced. The film could
Right.
be like science fiction, it could be horror, it could be way over the top, but I need to believe in the world that the film is creating. And I'm on board for anything if that's the case. But I do agree for a film to not have some kind of shape or no kind of closure, I always rate it less. And even though I know that's some artificiality to it, sure, but I always feel like even in someone's life, even in mundanities of life, there are exclamation points and ellipses in your life. And there
Right.
is a shape to those stories within your life. And that's what I want the film to illustrate minimally. Like it
Yeah.
doesn't have to have a big twist at the end, but it should have at least had a
Right.
point at the end instead of just being like, this is just people walking by the camera. I'm like, okay,
Right.
well, what's the point of that?
Which I'm always sort of like, my brain is kind of weird this way. It's always like circling around looking for little cracks in my own arguments or whatever. And it occurs to me that you and I have talked about John Dielman and how much I love that. So that might be contradictory. I can't really explain that one. It should be the most incredibly boring thing ever, but
well, that's the irony of that one, right? There is an exclamation point on that film,
yeah,
and I think that it's the worst false part. It's the worst part of the film for me, absolutely. Yep. And I find the methodical nature of her routine hypnotizing.
Yeah, okay, so we both do. We're both totally lined up on that. Yeah, my son was like, because I was trying to introduce it, it was like, you describe what happens in this movie, and it just sounds like the most boring movie you're ever going to see. But yeah, it's mesmerizing. And then he watched and he was like, no, it is boring.
I don't think I would have had the patience for that film at his age for sure.
Right. That's probably part of it.
That's a big part of it for sure. So, I mean, yeah. There's a lot. I mean, do you know Mike Leigh films or do you watch a lot of his films?
Oh, yeah. He's one of my top directors for sure.
This past year, I watched Another Year. I don't know if you've ever seen that one.
Oh, God. That's probably the one that has my.
Yes, I have it. You can filter on it right now.
There you go. Filter Mike Leigh. You'll see I have some very, very high grades, and that's one of the highest, actually.
Yeah. Well, again, speaking to age, I had seen some Mike Leigh's films back in the day. I watched Secrets and Lies back when it was nominated for an Academy Award. And I was much younger at that time. I not only saw Hard Truths and loved it, and then I went to see, well, what's easily available. And I think it was on Canopy, like the library app I mentioned. A bunch of these movies are on there, including Naked and some other ones, which I haven't rewatched Naked yet. But I did rewatch Secrets and Lies, which was on HBO. And I liked a lot better the second time around. And then I watched Another Year, and I was absolutely
God, that was so good. Did you find? I'm sure I have it as an A, maybe even an A plus.
An A plus, actually.
Okay, yeah, that's what it was. But they're pretty close. And
interesting. All right, so let's regroup next week, and we'll talk about Memento. Can't wait to talk about that one for sure.
Yeah, and, that's just such a. I think it's still my highest rated on that. Yeah, Memento, the movie, great enough to keep me from thinking about 9/11 as is happening.
It was more urgent to you.
Yeah,
9/11 was. What came out in movie theaters the weekend of 9/11? Donnie Darko came out.
Oh, weird. Okay.
No one wanted to see an engine fall off a plane at that moment in time.
Oh, that's right. Oops.
And then I kind of like think about that, the cult following that film set since.
Yeah, that one I think is one of the occasional cases where it went the other way. Like I was like fully on board for that being a masterpiece when I first saw it, and then I rewatched it a few years later, and I was like, might have overrated that one a little bit, which is also
God, the director's cut ruins that film. Crazy. All right, so thank you for the conversation.
All right, yeah. This is fun. We always get discursive, but hopefully you can work that in with your editing magic, or just say, "Hey, we just go on tangents. That's how it is." So
that's okay. This is all the tangents are for the Patreon, the Phantom Patreon that doesn't exist.
There you go. All right. Well, look forward to it. I'll get to watching Memento. I think you had said it's on HBO Max.
That one's on HBO. Yeah, that one's easy to find. The one that's going to be hard for us to find, because I've been looking ahead, is one of my favorite of his films, which I think is totally underrated, which is Insomnia. And that is not available to stream anywhere. It's always the case. That one's always so hard to find, and it really annoys me. All right. Enjoy the rest of the week and enjoy the football game.
Yeah.
The Olympics. Olympics are coming.
Sounds good. All right. Good night.